So there was a deception charge there. Boeing agreed to admit to the conduct, in return for which the charge would be deferred for 3 years. And 3 years of good behavior, 3 years the Justice Department wanted them to have improved their internal compliance and safety controls and transparency, et cetera, et cetera. And that was set to expire on January 7th of this year. On January 5th is when the Alaska Airlines airplane took off, and the door plug came out. Right. And so, the Justice Department, in conversations with the families of the victims of the crashes last month, told them that incident really, has sort of led to where they are now. They took a much closer look at Boeing's internal compliance operations, and they decided, ahead of a July 7th deadline that everyone faces here, that they determined Boeing had breached that. So that opens them up now. Boeing's admitted to the conduct. They can't fight this charge. If the Justice Department says we're going to charge you now, they can't say, no, let's go to court and we don't. It's like, no, you admitted to this. We have you on the record here from 3 years ago admitting to this conduct. So at a minimum, I expect that criminal charge will be filed in July in Texas.
What does it mean for families who lost loved ones in those crashes? Does that mean that they all can file suits, or what?
They've already filed suits. That's separate. Okay. What the families got really angry because under the Crime Victims' Rights Act, which I think was probably intended for street crime and murder victims, the Justice Department, prosecutors throughout the country are required to consult with or at least advise victims, families, loved ones before they cut a deal with a murderer. In this case, obviously it's a corporation, it's something different, but they were totally ignored by the Justice Department in 2020 to the point where the families asked the Justice Department through some ombudsman that in February of 2020, is there a criminal investigation we've read about in the papers? And the Justice Department told them no. They told them, no. And a year later, suddenly a deal is filed. They've been given no heads up. They want somebody to be held accountable for these two horrific crashes. And instead, Boeing doesn't have to show up. They get this with our deal. No one's being convicted. The only guy who was charged was a mid-level technical pilot who actually interacted with the FAA. He was charged. He went to trial. It lasted a few days. Within 2 hours or 3 hours, the jury acquitted him. So he was clearly the fall guy, and the Justice Department never went up the chain.
So what about now? What could be potential consequences
the legal
here?
Well,
or
whatever.
The 5-year statute of limitations. So the conduct to which Boeing agreed, that it committed defrauding the FAA, that's been told, so they can still be charged on that. But any other activity that was not part of the DPA, like if there's some involvement with higher ups at that time, the statute of limitations is passed.
Okay, Boeing can be charged, but Boeing's now going to be on its third CEO since the 737 MAX crashes in 2018 and 2019. Who would actually be punished as an individual, or would it just
I don't think you, at least as of now, the Alaska Air incident, there is that investigation that was started in January continues. That might lead somewhere to somebody who hid something or did something, shouldn't have done it. But in terms of this right now, I think, simply speaking, the one charge will probably be filed in July.
Okay.
But the investigation continues. So if there is misconduct in the last few years and the Justice Department gets hold of that, there have been multiple whistleblowers, then there could be individual charges down the road. But for now, it's just Boeing and at least this one charge at this point in time.
What could it mean, though, in terms of future costs or legal costs or other to the company? I'm looking at the stock is down 1.8% in a day where we are seeing kind of enthusiasm in the overall market. I'm just curious if investors, they obviously have some concern.
Yes.
It looks like.
Well, good question. In terms of costs, one, Boeing derives almost a third of its revenue from government contracts, from Defense Department, et cetera.
I was going to say,
and
it's
if you've committed
awkward,
a felony, you can be debarred from that.
But there's no alternative for what Boeing provides.
You can't debar Boeing.
Yeah.
So they will continue to be a contractor.
Alternative.
In fact, this is a challenge here for a company that's too big to fail and that's too important to the U.S. economy, is prosecutors, you've got to, if you want to punish a company like Boeing, you have to find that sweet point. That's the wrong term, but that point at which you're really inflicting punishing on them that causes them to change their behavior. But it's not so much punishment that it mortally wounds them.
Right.
So they're too important. They are too big to fail. So last time they erred on the side of let's not go hard at all. But the result has been this continuing problem with manufacturing and quality control, and the dog plug incident. If it had occurred at a higher altitude, that people would have died.
Correct.
So it's really I think it's clear to say that the deferred prosecution agreement, the intent of it 3 years ago, failed insofar as there was not a significant change in the corporate culture.
Which is, I think, what everybody's getting to at this point. Listen, folks, we see what the culture is. It's been going on for years. Got to fix it, even through how many CEOs?
Yeah, I mean, this will be the third CEO at the end of the year when Boeing says that, it'll find a new CEO. So we'll see.
Yes, and I think they have to do that because of this. It would be untenable for the current CEO, who was around on the board, Calhoun, for the 2018-2019 crashes and some of the revelations about how much the CEO then knew.
Good point.
Et cetera.
Houston, Seattle, Chicago, Washington, right? They're all over the place where they are in terms of located.
Yeah.
We've got a little bit of a problem, and it kind of persists. Greg Farrell, thank you so much. We want to make sense of this. It was on our radar, so we really appreciate it. Greg is investigative reporter for the legal enforcement team here at Bloomberg News, joining us here in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio. This is Bloomberg Radio.
It's 3:21 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg, with the S&P 500 index continuing to trade above 5,300. Keep it locked into Bloomberg Radio to see where we close. Will it be above that threshold? Right now, the S&P up 57, a gain of 1.1%. Again, 53.03 right now on the S&P 500 index. The Dow up 303, up 0.8%. NASDAQ Composite Index up 1.4%. NASDAQ now higher by 233 points. 10-year, 4.35%. The 2-year, 4.73%. Bitcoin up 7% right now, 65,909. Gold up 1.2%, 23.86 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude oil up 1%, 78.80 a barrel. The latest inflation report may offer the Fed some hope that inflation is resuming its downward trend. Lydia Bassour is senior economist at EY. She was interviewed this morning about the inflation data on Bloomberg Intelligence.
We're coming off of that first quarter where inflation has surprised on the upside, for several months. And what we need to see going forward is really softer inflation print, a string of softer inflation print that will help the Fed feel more confident that, they're in a good spot and can start, that easing cycle.
Lydia Bassour of EY. Uber is launching shuttle bus services to and from airports, concert venues, and sports stadiums, bringing a lower-cost service already available in its overseas markets to the United States. And Netflix will air 2 NFL games this Christmas Day in the streaming TV giant's latest push into live events. Recapping, S&P higher by 57 at 53.04, just about the best level of the day, up 1.1%. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much for that update, Charlie Pellet. Do appreciate it. Hey, here's something that may surprise you. It certainly surprised me when I read the most recent story by our next guest. The U.S. never really quit forced labor. So yes, we have the 13th Amendment in the Constitution. It was ratified back in 1865 in the aftermath of the Civil War. It prohibited slavery and involuntary servitude. But Carol, there's a caveat in there. Quote, except as a punishment for a crime. And that's where a recent big take brings us. The notion that corporate America never really stopped relying on forced labor, specifically forced labor done by inmates who it turns out do billions of dollars of work for companies and governments each year. Josh Idelson is Bloomberg News labor reporter. He joins us from our San Francisco bureau. Josh's story is going to be featured in the forthcoming issue of Businessweek magazine. You can read it now on the Bloomberg terminal and at bloomberg.com/businessweek. Josh, before we get to the lawsuit that's sort of at the center of your story here, just give us an overview for people like myself who weren't actually familiar with the idea that in many states, there are prisoners who do work for companies that many Americans use each and every day. What are some of those companies and who are these prisoners?
That's right. Inmates do everything from producing Russell Stover chocolates to upholstering high school auditorium furniture to data entry to making swimming trunks. Prisoners are working in fast food restaurants, in manufacturing, fighting fires, digging mass graves during the COVID pandemic. And as you said, this is billions of dollars a year of work for governments and companies. Some do work producing goods that are sold elsewhere. Some are working in the workplaces of private companies. And some are doing work for the prison system that is incarcerating them.
So talk a little bit about the compensation here, because the companies are paying for this work in many cases, but the folks who are actually doing the work aren't necessarily the ones who are receiving the compensation.
That's right. Even when a private company, provides a wage for the work of someone who's incarcerated, the state can take a substantial cut of that. And in Alabama, as we report, 2/5 goes to the Department of Corrections, ostensibly to defray the costs of that person's incarceration. That's on top of other fees that are deducted. And so in Alabama, you have a number of inmates bringing a lawsuit saying, in some cases, that their work either is unpaid or makes them only a few dollars an hour.
There are so many aspects of this story to get into about the injustices, to say the least. One of the big ones, though, and it's kind of in the sub-headline, if you will, of the story about many being kept in prison because the business is just too good. Get into that and how all of this has ultimately led to a lawsuit.
So this human trafficking and racketeering lawsuit alleges that the Alabama state officials, including the governor and the attorney general and the head of corrections, have conspired to keep black people incarcerated as cheap labor, and that companies have colluded to profit off of that cheap labor of inmates. The defendants in the lawsuit have mostly motioned to have it dismissed. They have made various legal arguments and in some cases suggested that the inmates are treated well or that people who are incarcerated deserve to be made to do this work.
What are some of the stories that you found out about in reporting out this story of some of the inmates and what they had to deal with or what their stories were?
One plaintiff in the lawsuit, Lakira Walker, says that she was sick in bed with the flu, and rather than being concerned about her health, a supervisor in the prison told her to get up and make us our 40%, referencing the state's cut from her labor working in a 30-some degree assembly line situation, handling frozen food, turning her fingers deep red. Another plaintiff, Arthur Potomi, says that when he told a fast food franchise co-owner that he was no longer going to do free work as a second job for the same family for their catering business, he was fired from the franchise and as a result received a disciplinary infraction that was held against him at a parole hearing.
One thing I was wondering, oh, sorry, forgive me. No, please go.
Another plaintiff, Alamirio English, says that he had to clean a filthy shower with human bodily fluids and was not usually provided gloves, and when he raised the need for safety equipment, was told he needed to learn to be submissive, or they would make him be submissive.
You guys are, you note in your story, and I want to kind of tie two things together. Earlier this year, as you report out, Josh, an Associated Press investigation found prison labor in the supply chains of dozens of prominent companies, including Cargill, Coca-Cola, Kroger, Target, and Walmart. These are obviously very well-known companies, certainly to the Bloomberg audience. So I'm curious about one, obviously the companies know, or do they know about the use of prison labor? And then I want to ask you about the Federal Prison Industries Program, the U.S. government's. I mean, what do they know about what's going on with these workers that are in prisons and working for companies, and about the conditions that are alleged?
Many companies did not provide comment for this story, but several companies have said that they are working to address any instances of forced labor in their supply chains. In some cases, companies say that it's their suppliers who are the issue and not them, the name brand themselves. The Federal Prison Industries Program has a brochure we note in the story where they advertise prison labor as an alternative to what they call unstable labor, and say you still get the made in the USA marketing advantage from getting your dorm furniture or swim trunks or data entry from this prison labor. We also note in the story that there have been allegations of safety issues there, an inspector general report that was critical of how that agency handled safety, though the inspector general later said that by the time the report came out, things were operating safely with limited exceptions.
Hey, Josh, there's a racial element here that's really important in your story when it comes to the granting of parole and how folks who are incarcerated can get out and to what extent they do get out. Talk to us about what you found in your reporting here.
So the lawsuit uses public records to conclude that there is a 2-to-1 disparity, with white people being twice as likely when considered to receive parole as black people in prison. They argue there are a series of decisions that the governor made that both made overall parole rates plummet in the Alabama system, and also created room for a significant racial disparity to emerge. And that is part of the grounds on which the plaintiffs are seeking an injunction to reverse changes to the parole system.
Well, I just got about 30 seconds here to wrap up, Josh. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, what is next, or what are you watching in terms of what happens to this story, these inmates, and these legal actions?
We'll be watching what happens with this case. It is in a fairly conservative federal appeals court. We have now a much more further right U.S. Supreme Court than we used to in this country. So there are some challenges ahead for this lawsuit, but we'll be watching what happens with it. Our case that experts say makes a compelling case. And more broadly, there are efforts, for example, on the ballot to end the exception allowing forced labor or slavery in prisons in several state constitutions, and those will continue to shape conversation more broadly.
Well, it's an incredible story, reality, to be quite honest. And so we highly recommend folks check it out. It's going to be in the new issue of Bloomberg Business Week. It's online and, of course, already on the Bloomberg. Josh Idelson, labor reporter at Bloomberg News, joining us from our San Francisco bureau. Josh, thank you.
Hey, let's get a check on the latest world and national news. We got Amy Morris in the Bloomberg 99.1 newsroom in Washington, D.C. Hey, Amy.
Hi, Tim. Slovak Prime Minister Robert Fico is in very serious condition. He was shot during a public appearance today, the first assassination attempt on a European leader in more than 2 decades. Now, his office says he was shot multiple times. Slovakia's president, Zuzana Kapitova, is Fico's political rival, but she condemned this attack.
What has happened is something that we cannot seem to realize because we cannot comprehend it. A physical attack on the Prime Minister is, first of all, an attack on a person, but it is also an attack on democracy.
The White House released a statement saying President Biden was also alarmed to hear reports of an attack on Fico and that the U.S. Embassy is in touch with Slovakia's government and the U.S. stands ready to assist. President Biden has challenged Donald Trump to a couple of debates. Trump has accepted. There will be 2 debates, one on June 27th, hosted by CNN, and on September 10th, hosted by ABC. Now, CNN says its debate will be held in its Atlanta studios and no audience will be present. President Biden didn't want an audience for his debate. Trump wants a big crowd. President Biden's campaign also doesn't want to include third-party candidates, but CNN is holding the door open for a third candidate who may meet polling and ballot access requirements. And a barge has slammed into a bridge. This happened today in Texas, and it has shut down a small island nearby. Traffic is closed in both directions on the road from Galveston to Pelican Island in Texas. The incident caused an oil spill. Crews are working to clean that up now. No word on the extent of the damage or if there are any injuries. This is just 2 months after a container ship struck a major bridge in Baltimore, killing 6, destroying the bridge, shutting down the port of Baltimore, and disrupting the flow of goods to ports across the East Coast. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg.
It's 3:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. S&P 500 index 5303 right now. This update brought to you by Mass Mutual, a leader in wealth management, offering financial advisors the best of both worlds, with resources to help run your business and the freedom to run it your way. Learn more at massmutual.com/wealth. And now let's head right over to the First Word breaking news desk for today's afternoon call. Here he is, Bill Maloney.
And good afternoon, Charlie. U.S. stocks are surging today after the benign CPI data. The Dow is currently up 315 points. The S&P's gained 57, while the NASDAQ is higher by 1.4%. The U.S. 10-year yield fell to 4.36%. Gold is higher by 28. Oil is in the green. And Bitcoin, that's higher by 7%. Among the main 11 S&P sectors, leaders were tech and real estate. Only energy and consumer discretionary were in the red. And leaders to the upside in the Dow, Salesforce and Amgen, while Nike and Travelers led to the downside. In other news, Uber added Costco as a grocery partner. The Disney CEO said marketing expenses at Disney Plus are too high, and Netflix is nearing a deal for NFL games. Wrapping things up, Cisco reports after the bell. Live from the First Breaking News Desk, I'm Bill Maloney. Charlie?
Okay, we thank you very much, Bill Maloney. Again, the S&P now at 5304. To hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg, type SQUAK, S-Q-U-K, on your Bloomberg terminal. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no.
Who's gonna drive you home?
Honey, please, I'll do the driving.
Drive on.
Excuse me, I want to drive.
It's the question that drives us.
This is the Drive to the Close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
All right, everybody, just got about 18 minutes left in today's trading session. Of course, Charlie breaking down the trade here, 5304 on the S&P 500. So you've got stocks at all-time highs. We've seen bond yields back off a bit after an inflation slowdown we got earlier this morning. Also some weaker retail sales numbers, reinforcing those bets the Fed maybe will cut interest rates as early as September. So let's get to it, because our next guest says valuations for several asset classes now look more appealing, and that economic conditions are also turning more favorable. So we want to dig a little bit into that as well.
Back with us is Luca Paolini, Chief Market Strategist at Pick Day Asset Management, here in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. I think it's been a couple years since you've been here.
Yeah, a couple of years. Great to be here.
It's good to see you. Welcome back.
London home base, right?
Yeah.
So all is well?
Yeah, all is good. All is good. Summer is coming. Not yet, but we're getting there.
We're getting there. Hey, I wanted to talk a little bit about what asset classes you find more appealing, because as Carol set up for us, we're at an S&P 500 and NASDAQ composite right now that are at records. So if you're sitting there with a pile of cash ready to deploy it, things are looking a little rich.
Well, I think what is interesting in the current situation is that a lot of valuation indicators that we look at tend to be pretty much in line with historical average or trend. There are some outliers, maybe U.S. equities, maybe Japanese bonds, but overall, most asset classes trade more or less where they should be. So I think the value is difficult to see great value. And if you see value, probably it's a value trap. Think about Chinese equities. We see value now, for example, in bonds, because you have a peak in U.S. growth. Inflation, is sticky, but probably trending down. The Fed is cutting rates. So we see value in bonds. And if you look at equities, to be honest, the value is more in Europe and Japan. Cyclical markets, you see some improvement in the economy as well, especially in Europe. And these are markets that are outperforming the U.S., believe it or not, this year. So I think we should probably give some credit to Europe. In the short term, in the long term, the U.S. is still the place to be.
Luca, I think so many people are talking about Japan, right? Finally, a change in certainly their outlook, if you will, and certainly for market potential. How do you play it? Do you buy a basket? What do you do in terms of the equity exposure specifically for Japan?
Well, let me say that, first of all, we also expect the yen to recover. So if you are, let's say, a foreign investor, you probably get the boost also from the currency side. Otherwise, look, we tend to focus more on the domestic companies in Japan. Japan is really a stock picker's market. It's not, you cannot just buy an index.
Been, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but we focus more on the domestic sectors because we think that the yen will get stronger. I think the domestic demand will improve. So we really believe that Japan has turned the corner, and I think when you look at valuations, they may look rich, but rich compared to the past 10 years when Japan was not in the same position as it is now.
You said in the long term, the U.S. is still the place to be. How long term?
I think so. I think so for a very simple reason. If you look at the main trend that we are going to see over the next few years, the artificial intelligence is one. But this is the U.S. where the U.S. is leading. You have companies that are generating a huge amount of profits. Profit margins are very solid. The risk for the U.S., I think, is coming more from the dollar, I have to say. And if you look over the medium term, though we think that the value, as I said, is in Europe and Japan. There will be some catch-up to do. But in the long term, it's difficult to be very bullish on Europe. There is very limited growth, no political leadership. It's very difficult. So the U.S., in a way, is the safest place to be.
So wait, so not exposure to Europe, or you want
just
a little bit?
In the short term, yes, because I think, look, if you look at the past 6 months, or the next 6 months, you have probably a rate cut at the ECB that comes before the Fed.
Correct.
Good valuation. There is good momentum in Europe. Inflation is falling more than in the U.S., and there is also momentum. So I see more.
Well, to Carol's point, how do you know if in terms of your thesis, when to move out of Europe and Japan into the U.S. if Europe and Japan are the place to be in the short term, but the long term the U.S. is?
I think if you start to see the the global economy to weaken significantly, I think you have to play safe and go back into the U.S. At that point, you probably can even consider China, because China is a completely different business cycle.
Do you really want to consider China, and how?
Not now. But if we expect the global economy to go into a recession or into a long phase of stagnation, you probably want to look at market where the cycle is different. China is in a completely different cycle. Inflation is negative.
Well, it's a cycle that's often ruled by the Chinese government in terms of what they do in terms of policy. So, like, how comfortable do you feel about that?
This will be only a tactical call. We don't think that China in the medium to long term offered the same value that it maybe could have offered 2 decades ago. Now is a very different environment. So that's why we stick with the US. But tactically, we think there is value set in Europe.
But how much exposure? Like, if you say tactically, when you talk about Europe or China for that matter, tactically, how small of an exposure are you
China, we don't have any exposure right now. What I was saying that if we expect a significant deceleration in global growth is something we may consider purely tactically. In Europe, it really depends on which funds you're talking about. I think, for a European investor having, let's say, a quite significant portion in European stocks, I think it makes sense. If you have 50% in equities, probably 20% in Europe makes a lot of sense.
On the U.S. side, I'm wondering if November's election and the outcome there changes your thesis at all.
Not yet. First of all, a lot of things can change between now and November. I don't think there would be a massive change in the direction of the country if there is a change. So I honestly think that it's too early to think about it. I personally think, though, that if Trump wins the presidency, I think what is probably is negative for bonds, while for equities, I think is much more difficult to assess. It's much more a relative game. I think it's going to be bad for bonds, but otherwise we think it's too early to play the election game here.
Look, I just got about a minute or so left here. I mean, what's interesting about this global market cycle right now? I mean, here we are, 4 years out of the pandemic. A lot of money that was thrown at investors and individuals globally as the economy shut down, but we're still kind of finding our way forward. But it's different. We've got a couple of wars. We've got geopolitics that constantly kind of creeps its way into almost every story and every, I feel like, investing conversation. So I don't know, what's interesting about the cycle? And forgive me, now I only have 40 seconds.
What is interesting, we are at an all-time high and we have an incredible number of shocks, COVID, inflation, interest rates, wars, but everything feels pretty good. And maybe it is good. And I think the surprising element is, for example, we have seen no recession when everybody was expecting one. And I think we have seen the economy incredibly resilient to much higher interest rates. Why? I think because we had a fantastic increase in wealth over the past 2 decades. People feel wealthier. And they
some
probably
people.
know some people. I'm talking on average.
Yeah.
That means that I think they're much less vulnerable to a rise in inflation or interest rates. And I think we have to look into these indicators. I think wealth creation the past 2 decades has been massive, and there is still a lot of money around. And I think that's obviously reflected in this fantastic performance of markets.
Well, good to have you here in studio. Safe travels home.
Thank you.
Yeah,
I'll see you soon.
Luca Paolini, he's Chief Market Strategist at Pictet Asset Management, joining us here. Coming up next, Beyond the Bell, our cross-platform on the markets. That's next.
your company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
3:53 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg, and we have got the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ pushing higher with the S&P at 5304. Among the names reporting today after the close of trading, we'll be hearing from Cisco Systems. Cisco will provide an update on whether corporate spending budgets remain tight. Cisco shares ahead of earnings, up now by 1.4%. Frank McCourt, a real estate billionaire with ambitions to improve the web, says he plans to build a consortium to bid for social media app TikTok's U.S. business. McCourt is former owner of the LA Dodgers and executive chairman of the investment firm McCourt Global, and he spoke about the status of the bid this morning with Bloomberg Radio.
It's too early for me to make these statements. We've retained Guggenheim Securities as our advisor, along with Kirkland & Ellis as an advisor, to put together all the pieces of this bid. But let's be realistic. This is early in a process. It's still very noisy. We don't know exactly what ByteDance will be selling. They've filed a lawsuit recently, so they're fighting this. But I am confident that at the end of the day, they'll either have to sell or shut it down. And we don't want to see TikTok shut down. There's 170 million users enjoying TikTok. We want to see them continue to enjoy it.
Frank McCourt, chair of investment firm McCourt Global. Those U.S. assets are valued at $35 to $40 billion by Bloomberg intelligence analysts. Walmart reports tomorrow morning. Analysts are looking for first quarter adjusted EPS of 52 cents on revenue of $159 billion. Up next, though, Cisco after the close of trading. Again, ahead of that report, we've got Cisco up now by 1.4%. And those are our top company stories at this hour. I'm Charlie Pelletan. This is Bloomberg.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stenevec on Bloomberg Radio and Television.
All right, everybody, in just a moment, we're going to head over to our TV colleagues and count it down to the close on this Wednesday. Charlie just, of course, breaking down the numbers and got a rally underway, a risk trade on, that's for sure, as we've seen yields back off and expectations of Fed rate cuts this year amp up again following the inflation read and really that retail report earlier this morning. Having said that, we want to get to a story that is the most read on the Bloomberg in the past 60 minutes. Has to do with two brothers. They studied at MIT. They were arrested and charged with exploiting a weakness in the Ethereum blockchain and stealing $25 million in 12 seconds in what prosecutors called a first-of-its-kind caper. Again, something that will probably find its way to Netflix.
We're talking about the 24-year-old Anton Pereira-Bueno and James Pereira-Bueno. They were charged by federal prosecutors in Manhattan with fraud and money laundering offenses. They're accused of carrying out the lightning-fast heist plotted over the course of months from their keyboards last year.
Yeah, I love this. The U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York saying in a statement, it's a quote, "The brothers, who studied computer science and math at one of the most prestigious universities in the world, allegedly used their specialized skills and education to tamper with and manipulate the protocols relied upon by millions of Ethereum users across the globe." The two studied at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, according to public records. So, yay, great, learn a lot, be smart. Don't break the law?
You know,
or did they break the law? We don't, like, what did they, were they just really smart?
Well, we should note lawyers for the brothers haven't responded to a request for comment. They allegedly did because they were arrested Tuesday in Boston and New York. They're expected to appear in federal court this afternoon. You know, MIT had one of the best returns on investment in terms of colleges that the Bloomberg team studied here.
You know why? Kids are really smart.
I'm not saying this is the reason why, Carol, okay? This was an outlier.
Is there a connection here?
No, there's not a connection. It's a lot of great computer science, you know, and that leads to some jobs that are very high paying, but I'm just pointing that out.
Scheme
not related
is the first
at all.
of its kind, so they were innovative in how they allegedly did a crime. Allegedly. This is it, you know, you want your kids to be smart, you know, learn math, learn other stuff, go to MIT and other places, but I don't know. Could lead, allegedly,
Carol,
to a crypto heist, allegedly. All right, anyway, it is our most read story on this Wednesday, May 15th, on the Bloomberg in the past 60 minutes. Right now, though, just got a few minutes left in the trading session, so over to our TV colleagues we go, because Beyond the Bell starts right now.
Beyond the bell. Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
And right now, we are 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Romaine Bostic alongside Alex Steele. We're counting you down to the closing bell. And here to help take us beyond the bell, it's a global simulcast. We're joined right now by Scarlett Fu in the TV studio. There's Alex Steele. There's Carol Masser in the radio booth. And I believe, finally, Tim Stenovic is back from his long vacation. So we got the whole gang back together. And you come back on a day where we got record highs across the board here.
Yeah, go figure, right? Yeah. Everything is awesome, as we like to say. We're seeing some buying. It looks like a little bit into the close here. I keep looking at the semiconductor space, guys. Up 1.7% yesterday, up another 2.9% today. So it continues. I think we're actually up about 4 days, I think, here in a row, 3 or 4 days in a row. So the momentum certainly in that space continues outperforming even the broader market, it looks like.
Even though we're seeing records likely at the close for the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ, we just spoke to Luca Paolini over at Pick Day, Scarlett, and he said in the short term, he sees a rotation to Europe and Japan as being a good value for investors. In the long term, though, the U.S. is still the place to be.
Yeah, but maybe valuation-wise, it doesn't look as good compared to those other markets. Notably, volume was definitely above average at the start of the trading day, but by midday, that really tapered off. And now we're looking like we're going to close down about 6% from the 20-day average.
I mean, I guess my question also is, the financial conditions being so loose, right? Are they loose enough for the Fed to have to rethink things or not? And I know that they're looking at the labor market and saying the labor market's telling us that we're tight enough. But then Kashkari, I feel like, opens a door crack to talk about if financial conditions are actually tight enough. And then you look at the meme stocks. That, to me, doesn't say tight financial conditions, guys.
Yeah, that's definitely going to be something that the Fed will have to debate. I agree. I'm not quite sure where this tightness is being viewed right now. But at least for today, definitely things are loose, and everyone seems to be enjoying it. The clapping, the confetti, and the bells. The Dow Jones Industrial Average closing out the day up by more than 350 points, back above that 39.9 level, up about 0.9% here on the day, and that is a record high. The S&P with a fresh record high at 53.08, up 61 points, or more than 1% on the day. The NASDAQ Composite also up, extending to a fresh record high, up 231 points, or 1.4%. The NASDAQ Composite, we should point out, which was lagging, the NASDAQ 100, which was lagging the Composite, also up 1.5% to a fresh record high. And there's your Russell 2000, not a record high, but still a pretty decent day, up 1.1%.
Pull out your 5,300 hats, if you will.
I got it.
Good to know, good to know. Hey, S&P 500, folks, most names in the index higher today, 358 gaining ground today. Scarlett, 143 to the downside, 2 unchanged.
And it's a pretty simple story when you look at the sector performances. A lot of green there. Every single sector is not down. I point that out because consumer discretionary is unchanged, as is consumer staples. But tech is leading the way, up by 2.3% as a group.
All right, so let's get to some of the individual gainers. This is the S&P NASDAQ 100 close at their first record highs since March. Super Microcomputer, #1 gainer in the S&P 500, just finishing the day off its highs of the day. Still a gain of about 15.7% here, rallying on some heavy volume. I couldn't find really any significant catalyst or specific catalyst. I did see some buying of shares popping up on some of the 13F filings, which I know we're all keeping a watch on, but nonetheless, an outperformer in today's session. Let's go to BioCryst Pharmaceuticals, ticker is BCRX. This too was an outperformer. It is a small cap, $1.3 billion market cap biotech, rallying on higher than average volume after at least 5 insiders, including the CEO, issued SEC filings saying that they bought more than $800,000 worth of the stock. This stock gaining almost 19% in today's session. I should point out some short covering had to be going on because it's about 70% of the float being shorted. So some of that going on. Petco, another one. WOOF is the ticker, and this one finishing just off its highs of the day, almost a 28% gain, jumping the most in more than 3 years. Again, heavy volume in this name. Positive market reaction to the company's appointment of Glenn Murphy as executive chair to lead the search for a new CEO. You know that there's been some changes here. The last CEO stepping down, I think that was in March, Ron Coughlin stepping down following several quarters of underperformance. Stock's down about 23% year to date. Again, Short covering probably happening. Almost 40% of the float is shorted, so some of that going on, but nonetheless an outperformer today.
Before you move on to decliner, I was just looking. There was 71 52-week highs in the S&P today, and quite a few of those were record highs as well.
Significant.
But and it was pretty broad-based, too, because remember, every time we get these rallies, it's always just basically like the Mag 7 and a couple other stocks, but it's banks, it's semiconductors, it's material stocks. It's basically everything right now in the pool.
So tight financial conditions, question mark?
Exactly. Yes, good point.
Hey, I want to go to some of the decliners that I've had my eye on today.
Tim, by the way?
Sorry?
Where have you been?
Oh, I've been doing some cycling in Colorado.
Okay.
I leave for 2 days and meme stocks go nuts. Is that what happens?
And then you come back. And then you come back and then they don't.
2021 all over again. It's kind of wild here. Before we get to the meme stocks, I do want to talk about Tesla. It did finish down 2% roughly today. A couple pieces of news that I'm keeping my eye on. The company must face a proposed class action lawsuit that alleges it misled customers about its car's self-driving car capabilities. It's a setback for Tesla, just as Elon Musk has really staked the company's future on autonomy. We know that big unveil's coming in August. And then also NIO, the Chinese competitor to Tesla, is launching a more affordable brand in China that really takes aim at Tesla. Shares finishing down by 2% today. And now on to those meme stocks, because it seems like Keith Gill, aka Roaring Kitty, was pretty busy over the weekend with some social media posts that set off some buying, at least with AMC and GameStop. Those two companies were among the top 10 bought by retail investors on Tuesday, $51 million and $16 million daily inflows, according to data from Vanda. Today, we saw some selling, down 20% for AMC. The company did take advantage of that equity rally that we've seen in recent days through a private deal to reduce its debt. No fundamental news for GameStop, though, ticker GME, finishing down 19% today. Those shares have tripled in the last 2 weeks, but unlike AMC, it hasn't sold any stock. Like I said, it's meme stocks all over again.
Yeah, but you just gotta love AMC, CFO. Like, they got the job done. They're like, all right, let's do this. Here's our playbook. I'm taking a look at the bond market here. It was actually kind of exciting. Buying across the curve, you got a lot of buying in the 3 and the 5, so basically the belly. You have all the yields kind of really down below their 50-day moving average and either below or kissing their 200-day moving average. So some technical damage done on that level, Romaine.
All right, Cisco earnings crossing the wire right now. Shares higher in after-hours trading. The company looks like they have a beat on several key metrics here. Let's just walk you through the numbers here. For the most recent quarter, the company is saying revenue came in at about $12.7 billion. That's slightly higher than estimates. We should also point out that the adjusted EPS number also hitting targets as well. But the forecast appears to be why we're seeing the shares higher. For the full year, the company says revenue will be $53.6 to $53.8 billion. That's higher than what it had than the guidance it had given before. And the high end of that range is basically on the nose with what the street was looking for at around 53. Adjusted EPS, the full year forecast, guys, 369 to 371. That's kind of slightly tweaked to what they had before, which is 368 to 374. But the street was looking for 364. So again, the bottom end of this range would be higher than the average of analyst estimates. So a beat in the most recent quarter and guidance for the full year above estimates.
Yeah, stock, off about 2% year to date, but we are seeing a pop of about 4.5% in the aftermarket. Some commentary and context coming off of this release. Former Splunk CEO Gary Steele named president of go-to-market at Cisco effective immediately. Cisco Chief Customer and Partner Officer Jeff Sheretz will depart after a 24-year career at the company. And they also noted that the acquisition of Splunk had a negative impact of 1 cent to third quarter adjusted EPS. So getting a little bit more color in terms of the business there.
Yeah, and this was, of course, the first earnings report since Cisco closed the purchase of Splunk, which was really aimed at broadening out Cisco into a provider of networking services, not just a maker of networking gear. I'm also looking at the fourth quarter, that is this current quarter, fiscal fourth quarter, adjusted gross margin. It sees it at 66.5% to 67.5%. Analysts were looking for 67.4%. So at the high end, it certainly covers the consensus estimate, but at the low end, it would be below what analysts are looking for.
In comments ahead of that call, CEO Chuck Robbins touting the company's ability to bring together networking, security, observability, and data, which allows Cisco to offer customers unrivaled digital resilience for the AI era. I mean, this is a company that's been through many different generations of Silicon Valley, and the latest among them, of course, is the AI generation.
Yeah, certainly something that they've got in terms of a rethink of how their strategy is. All right, guys, continuing to see, though, that name higher in the aftermarket. Just a quick check up, about 4.4%. All right, that's a wrap. Cross-platform, radio, TV, YouTube, Bloomberg Originals, Beyond the Bell is what we call it. We will see you again, same time, same place tomorrow.
This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Tim Stenivek on Bloomberg Radio.
It is Bloomberg Business Week. I'm just seeing a headline cross the Bloomberg terminal right now, Carol. AT&T is going to be providing space-based broadband direct to cell phones. They're teaming up with AST Space Mobile to provide wireless service from space. It's a challenge to Elon Musk's SpaceX, which struck a similar deal 2 years ago with T-Mobile.
All right, so interesting to see a little bit of deal flow in that world.
What does that mean if you're an AT&T customer?
I don't know.
Does that mean you can just like have cell phone service anywhere? I don't know. I got to look into this.
It's very interesting,
right?
Yeah, exactly. All right, so more to come. But there's a great write-through. Our Todd Shields already putting it out on the Bloomberg, so head to Bloomberg.com or check it out on the Bloomberg terminal. Hey, one thing, too, if you check out at Bloomberg.com or the Bloomberg terminal, you'll find a story by our team that gets into what Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer is up to. He's got a plan for artificial intelligence. The mission is shielding Americans from the risks posed by AI while promoting the emerging technology with at least $32 billion in annual government spending to stay ahead of rivals, including China, according to a highly anticipated policy blueprint from a bipartisan group of senators that was released today by Senator Schumer.
So we're figuring it all out, or at least
we are.
We're trying to.
Right.
Right, on all levels.
Brad Stone, and how you make money and how does it impact the startup community when you've got the big behemoths.
You were at Milken last week.
Was
Was every single conversation had to do with AI?
I don't know that every single conversation was AI. What was interesting was a real shift to this idea of, okay, AI is going to happen. That means a lot of data, computations, and that's going to use a lot of energy. That really was kind of a shift in focus for me. I think it's safe to say, we keep saying we're early on in the innings if it was a baseball game, and so we're not quite sure exactly how it all plays out and impacts every industry, although right now every industry feels like they have to have some say in it or some actions in it.
Well, let's see what Sanjay Poonen has to say about all this. Sanjay's CEO at Cohesity, former COO, I should say, of VMware, joining us from the Bay Area. Good to have you with us, Sanjay. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having me, Tim and Carol, on your show.
Yeah, good to see you again. How do you see all this? Because we check in with you every few months, and it seems like since last time we spoke with you in the fall, the idea of this sort of new layer of technology, this new element, AI that is, just being sort of put over everything that's out there right now. There aren't AI companies necessarily. It's like every company has to sort of latch onto this. How are you seeing it from your perch over at Cohesity?
Yeah, Tim, I think you're absolutely right. Since we last talked, obviously we announced our big transaction of a deal to acquire Veritas, but in AI, it's been brewing. I did my computer science work in analytics, and at that time, predictive systems. I would not have ever thought that this whole move to generative AI, it's probably the most fundamental technology shift I've ever seen in my 25, 30 years in the tech industry. We got on very early on into the ways in which generative AI could work to our benefit, which we're kind of a data security company, and generative AI lets us search large forms of unstructured data. You could have millions of PDFs and you can summarize it. NVIDIA came to us last year, was very intrigued by the technology, and not just decided to partner us, but also invest in us. And at the March keynote of Jensen, he's the Da Vinci, I think, of this space, right? He talked about it. So I think this is really revolutionizing. I think you have to sort of separate a lot of the hype from the actual substance. But when you can actually turn much of this technology to a productivity enabler, Tim, this is amazing technology.
Well, so how does it impact our world then if it's so amazing? That's, I think, the thing we're trying to figure it out. What does it really mean in our day-to-day operations, either at work, at home, and at play?
I think it really depends by the use case. If you look at the analogy I like to give as an example is spell check in the early days of a word processor. There was fear as to what it would do, but in the old days before you wrote documents, you may have had somebody else proofread it. A lot of that, whether it's spell checking or grammar checking, a standard word processor, whether it's Microsoft Office or Google Docs, does for you. And I think the basis of generative AI, ChatGPT, any of these co-pilots they're the world's best summarization tool. And if you could have something summarize a vast amount of data, summarize Leo Tolstoy for me in a half page, that idea of summarization or a first draft is going to help everybody be more productive. So I actually view this not as a technology that's going to take jobs away. It's going to make us enormously more productive. Now, it will allow jobs to move up the stack. But, my value add in writing documents shouldn't be spell checking, grammar checking. It should be the ideas that come out of that, and hopefully grammar checking and spell. Same way here. If summarization of large amount of data makes me more productive, I can go do a lot of other tasks. So this is going to be a debate we have to work through. Now, there is another side of generative AI that could have negative impacts that we have to watch, and that's where this notion of responsible AI allows you not to be able to summarize and search things that are going to have a destructive effect on humanity.
I also do wonder, okay, so it makes us more productive. Does it make us stupider? And I say that because, more and more.
I think it's a really good question.
I just think about the things like I write a sentence and it completes it for me. It's like I don't even need to think and have a complete thought. And does it help me? Does it make me write faster and more productive? Yes. Am I sometimes blown away that, like, how did you know that's where I wanted to go? And I understand how it all works. But I just do wonder how much of kind of thought is being taken away from us.
Carol, you have an interesting question. I'm helping my daughter apply for college next year, and in one of the college prep classes, her counselor said, please don't use generative AI to write your application because I know when you're doing it. And some people didn't do it for the last paragraph. We've got to help our young, this is especially a question, especially apt for
and that's terrible that we need to even say that, because that's the whole idea of a college essay, is to kind of get in your head and get an idea of who you are.
I think for the education sector, this is a very important, profound question you're asking. Where do we allow? And it's the same question that existed in maybe third or fourth or fifth grade math, where you decided this is the stage where someone can use a calculator. They had to learn how to add, get the basics, but at some point in time, is our value add knowing how to add 3.45627 plus 4.32? No, I mean, it's lots of decimals. You got the point. You can use a calculator now. But maybe that happened in 8th, 9th, or 10th grade. I think the same thing should apply to the way in which schools, universities think about how they're going to use generative AI. And this is something we have to sort through as a society. It has profound impact on our young people.
But Sanjay, it's not even schools. Like, I think about it, I love my job because every day I'm kind of paid to research people, read their work, do my own research. And like, how cool is that I'm still kind of learning as an individual? And I do just get a little nervous about whether or not that learning curve later in our world gets taken away.
But Carol, what I would suggest to you is the following. Let's just say Tim and you, before I came on the show, could ask ChatGPT, okay, I mean, I've studied a little bit of literature. Yeah. What would you want me to Sanjay Poonen? Now, that's not going to be the only thing, but that's a good first start. You might augment your research with going a little deeper. And if someone gave me a first good start into your job, you're talking to some of the best people in the world. So I think that's the way we've got to think about this. It has to be viewed as a first start. It's not replacing human ingenuity. You'll never get ChatGPT or the co-pilots to define a musical, composition that will be as good or better than Mozart or Beethoven. That creativity is always going to have a musician on the side. So I think this is something.
Are you so sure about that?
Well, I'm not so sure, but I hope the genome of creativity thrives and it doesn't replace that thing. But it hopefully makes us get better at doing some of the things and make some of the mundane jobs go away. And that's how we've been viewing it at Cohesity. Is there's a lot of our, hundreds of exabytes that sit on our platform. We want people to be able to extract value out of data is the new gold. And that's generative AI helps our customers get enormous value out of it.
And I will say, in terms of healthcare, I think there are people who are saying that it's going to help advance healthcare and either coming up with
drug
new molecules or drug discovery.
Right. Drug discovery.
Yeah.
And much of the future of drug discovery is large amount of genome sequencing with the algorithms. And if it can save lives, absolutely. It's the same way that, medical research has helped us get various different forms of vaccines and so on. I think AI technologies, more than just generative AI, is going to have a profound impact on those areas of our livelihood.
I'm still waiting for the dishwasher machine.
That's all I want.
Not the dishwasher, but like an actual person, humanoid robot to come.
Amika?
Yeah, do all those things.
The robot.
That, you know.
Well, think about the robot that does the vacuuming, right? What's that technology?
Roomba.
Like,
Roomba, yeah.
yeah, there you go, right? So it's a matter of time. I mean, that many of these tasks,
Yeah.
you know, make us more productive at home. I think predictive maintenance, I mean, the more that you can know that something in your car or fridge is about to break down because it's detecting
Sanjay?
things that are, you know.
We got to run, but I always love our conversations, love how you think and where we get to go with you. So thank you so much for that. Sanjay Poonen, CEO at Cohesity, joining us here right on Bloomberg Business Week.
It's 421 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. Cisco System shares, they're higher by 5% after hours. Cisco out with a solid sales and profit forecast for the current quarter, indicating some customers are beginning to invest in their computer networks again. Right now, Cisco up 5% after hours. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all pushed higher today. Record on NASDAQ, record for the S&P. First close ever above 5,300, 53.08, up 61, a gain of 1.2%. The Dow up 349 at 39,908 on the Dow, up 0.9%. NASDAQ up by 1.4%. 10-year, 4.34%. The 2-year, 4.72%. Spot gold today also moved higher, and the price of crude West Texas Intermediate also advanced today as well. Bottom line, earnings better than expected out of Cisco Systems. Cisco delivering a solid sales and profit forecast for the current quarter. We had Cisco up today by 5% after hours. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Quick check, though, on Chubb. Shares of Chubb, they're up about 6.2% in the after hours. Don't forget the 13F filings are coming out, and we just saw one about Berkshire Hathaway cutting its position in Apple and adding Chubb in the March 31st quarter, according to their 13F filing. So we're seeing that name. It's been a name that I think they, it looks like now they've got what do they have? About a position, so about a $6.7 billion stake in shares of Chubb. So it's a company that's got a $102 billion market cap company, but nonetheless, we're seeing that stock move as a result of the ownership here.
They are now the third largest shareholder after Vanguard and BlackRock. They've got 6.4% of the company. Shares jumped as much as 9.9%, Carol, in post-market trading after that filing from Berkshire Hathaway showed it built a position in the insurance company.
All right, you are listening and watching Bloomberg.
Bouncing in the club where the heat is on all night on the beach till the break of dawn. I'm going to Miami. Welcome to Miami.
Well, back in February, last time she was on with us, she said she had some news about her next move that she wasn't quite ready to share. Well, now she's ready. We've got back with us the former CEO of Celebrity Cruises, Lisa Lutoff-Perlo. She's the one who went from selling cruises door to door to becoming the CEO of the company, all detailed in her book, Making Waves, A Woman's Rise to the Top Using Smarts, Heart, and Courage. Now, Lisa Lutoff-Perlo is taking over as CEO of World Cup Miami. She joins us now from Fort Lauderdale. Lisa, how are you?
I'm great, Tim and Carol. So nice to be back with you. How are you?
We're doing well. Congratulations. You had kind of given us a hint you would have some news, so we're so glad that you're back. Well, congratulations. Tell us about World Cup Miami and being named CEO and kind of how it came together and why you wanted to do it.
Yeah, well, that's the last question is probably the most interesting, right, Carol?
Yeah.
The World Cup is coming, the Men's World Cup is coming to North America in 2026. Probably most people already know that. In the United States, there are 11 cities that will be hosting matches and the final. New York has the final. Miami is one of the cities. We were awarded 7 matches. And one day, just out of the blue, I got a text from a woman that I know. I met under different circumstances, and she texted me and said, "Got a minute?" And had no idea why she was asking that. And I said, "For you, of course." She called me and talked to me about this, and I wasn't sure that I really wanted to jump in and
what was the trepidation?
I was just stepping away after a crazy career and working really hard and being so busy. And I knew I wanted to do some things. I just wasn't sure I wanted to take on something so big and something I really didn't know anything about, men's soccer and the World Cup. But the more I talked to people, the more excited I got. And just like everything else I've done in my life and career, I said, what the heck? I'm a lifelong learner. I'll figure it out. And here I am.
I was going to say, it kind of sounds like your path to becoming CEO at Celebrity, which was, taking advantage of the opportunities that I don't want to say were given to you, but that you had earned. There was a reason people were asking you to do these things, going from, essentially a salesperson all the way up to CEO.
Sure. And there was a reason that she reached out to me, and because she was in a meeting. Here's how the story went. She was in a meeting, and she's representing a big stakeholder in the Miami World Cup. And they were describing the attributes of the ideal CEO that they wanted to run it. And she said every time they mentioned an attribute, which one of them was actually being a CEO, she said my name kept popping into her head, and she just had to reach out to me to do this. And as I've learned, as I've gone through this, I realized that understanding and knowing soccer isn't what they were looking for. They were looking for someone who ran a serious business, because this is a serious business. Someone who could bring communities together. And there's no more bringing of communities better than the cruise industry. Collaborating, because we have to collaborate across many different cities and counties to pull this off. And running extraordinary events, and guest experiences, which I did, and also really challenging logistical issues that you have to deal with. And we're going to have 600,000 to 1 million visitors in South Florida during those 5 weeks. So those were all the reasons that I think I was on their list and why they chose me.
Well, wait. So how quickly did you say yes? After some trepidation, how quickly did you say, yeah, I'm on it?
It took me a little while. First of all, it was a long process. As you probably know, as these things go. The more people I talked to, though, the more excited I got about it. Listen, this is historic. This has never been done before. It's the biggest World Cup in the history of the World Cup. There are 48 teams, 104 matches, 3 different countries. This is big. The world stops when the World Cup happens. I thought about all the people I was going to meet and all the opportunities that I was going to be a part of that are historic and that have never happened to me before. And it's a 2-year gig. So I'm like, all right, you can do this. You can sign up for this. And it has a beginning, it has an end. So I'm in.
You're so real. And I got to ask you, did you binge on Ted Lasso? Did you do a lot of Googling online, since this wasn't necessarily something you were so familiar with? What did you do to kind of be like, yeah, this is kind of cool?
Well, first of all, Carol, I have binged on Ted Lasso probably 3 times for all 3 seasons, right?
Fair.
The greatest show ever. And so, sure. And listen, I'm in Miami. We've got Messi. We've got Beckham. This is the soccer capital, the football capital of the United States. It's the gateway to Latin America. Miami is a sexy, wonderful city. Everyone wants to be here. So there were so many great things about it. It's not going to be easy, but nothing in my career has been. But I just thought about how cool and exciting this was going to be.
Yeah.
And my husband is a huge soccer fan, loves soccer, loves the World Cup. And I worked with 20,000 crew members from all over the world who all played football. That was their sport, and that's what they loved. So I do have an affection for the sport, even though I don't know a lot about it.
Well, and my understanding, you really kind of lay it out really well why it does make sense for you to be doing this. My understanding is that this is going to bring in more visitors than the Super Bowl. So it's a lot, right? This is just massive. We all know it. I just remember when it's going on, it doesn't matter what company you're at, there's viewing rooms because everybody is watching it. So tell us a little bit about how you're thinking about how do you put your own spin on it, your own mark on it.
Well, we're in the planning stages of that right now. So, I have 2 ambitions as the CEO of the FIFA 2026 Miami World Cup. One is to be the envy of every other city in North America that's hosting these matches. And the other is to ensure that it performs financially because, I want a surplus. I don't care if it's $1. Mm-hmm. And so we're in the planning process right now. Over the next 90 days, we're going to put our plan together about what we need to raise and how we need to offset the costs. And I really want to think about what's going to attract companies to sponsor this. I will tell you, every time that I am talking to someone and they say, so what are you doing? And I mention what I'm doing, their eyes light up. Everybody wants to be a part of this. It's families, it's companies, it's employees, it's communities, it's everybody. Soccer is just, 19 billion viewers. Now, it's over a period of 5 weeks, but there are 19 billion people watching all of these matches all over the world when the World Cup happens. 1.5 billion watch the Super Bowl. So this, in order of magnitude, is ginormous.
Well, and I'm just thinking about Tim and I are lucky enough that we've covered the U.S. Open here in New York City, and it's yes, it's about the matches and the players, no doubt about it, but it is such a hospitality experience in terms of the food and the venues. And we've got about 40 seconds, then we'll come back and talk more. But are you thinking a lot about that? You understand hospitality.
Yeah, that was one of the big reasons they liked me for the role. And I do understand hospitality. And absolutely, we are looking at every venue in Miami-Dade County. We're looking at outside of the county because we're going to have to spread out with all those people, as you can imagine. But yeah, we're going to figure out some fantastic events and hospitality for everyone, for sure.
Do you think we should go down there, Carol, for the match?
Lisa, I think you need to make that part of, like, you know,
should we do a little broadcast?
Bring us down and we'll do a live broadcast along with everybody else who's going to be there.
Well, you two are my favorites, so I'll figure it if we can figure that out for sure.
Score, it's official.
I mean, your home of New Jersey will be pulling you that way too for matches.
Hey, listen, New York, New Jersey has the final.
Exactly.
That's
That's
true.
what I mean, Carol.
All right, don't go anywhere. We're going to come back with Lisa Lutoff-Perlo. She is, as we said, taking over as CEO of World Cup Miami that is coming up, former CEO of Celebrity Cruises. We had some fun time with her a short time back talking about her book, Making Waves, A Woman's Rise to the Top Using Smarts, Heart, and Courage. She's going to come back with us in just a moment right here on Bloomberg Business Week.
Hey, let's get a check on the latest world and national news. Wait, Amy Morris in the Bloomberg 99.1 Newsroom in Washington, D.C. Hey, Amy.
Hi, Tim. Slovakia's populist Prime Minister Robert Fico was shot multiple times and gravely wounded after a political event and an attempted assassination that shocked the small country and reverberated across Europe. His office says he was shot several times. Slovakia's president, Zuzana Kapitova, Fico's political rival, condemned the attack.
What has happened is something that we cannot seem to realize because we cannot comprehend it. A physical attack on the prime minister is, first of all, an attack on a person, but it is also an attack on democracy.
The White House released a statement saying President Biden was alarmed to hear reports of the attack on Fico and that the U.S. Embassy is in touch with Slovakia's government and the U.S. is ready to assist. This is the first assassination attempt on a European leader in more than 2 decades. President Biden has challenged Donald Trump to a debate. Trump has accepted, and now there will be 2 campaign debates, one on June 27th, hosted by CNN, and another on September 10th, hosted by ABC. CNN says its debate will be held in its Atlanta studios and no audience will be present. President Biden did not want an audience for the debate. Trump wants a big crowd. President Biden's campaign also doesn't want to include third-party candidates, but CNN is holding the door open for a third candidate who might meet polling and ballot access requirements. As Russian forces renew their offensive in Ukraine, U.S. officials say help is on the way. Secretary of State Antony Blinken announcing a special $2 billion fund set up by the U.S.
So this will assist Ukraine in acquiring those weapons. 2 is to focus as well on something that Dmytro just talked about, investing in Ukraine's defense industrial base.
Secretary of State Antony Blinken in Kyiv says Ukraine can also use those funds to purchase weapons from other countries. Global news 24 hours a day and whenever you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Amy Morris, and this is Bloomberg.
It's 4:40 on Wall Street. We do check markets all day long here at Bloomberg. Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway has unveiled a $6.7 billion stake in the insurer Chubb, ending months of suspense over its mystery position in a financial firm previously kept concealed in regulatory filings. Cisco Systems shares are up after hours. Cisco delivered a solid sales and profit forecast for the current quarter, indicating that some customers are beginning to invest in their computer networks again. After hours, shares of Cisco up now by almost 6%. S&P 500 tops 5,300 in a record-breaking stock rally. This on the day when we got the CPI report this morning. S&P up 61 to 5308, up 1.2%. The Dow up 349, up 0.9. NASDAQ up 231, a gain today of just about 1.4%. 10-year yield 4.34%. The 2-year 4.72%. Bitcoin today up by 7%. Gold up $29 the ounce, up 1.3%. And West Texas Intermediate crude up by 1.1%. Well, as for the overall economic rate and rate backdrop, Luca Paolini is Chief Investment Strategist at Pictet Asset Management.
Everything feels pretty good, and maybe it is good. And I think the surprising element is, for example, we have seen no recession when everybody was expecting one. And I think we have seen the economy incredibly resilient to much higher interest rates. Why? I think because we had a fantastic increase in wealth over the past 2 decades. People feel wealthier.
Luca Paolini of Pictet Asset Management, interviewed right here on Bloomberg Business Week. Recapping, S&P at a record 5308, up today by 1.2%. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Carol Master, along with Tim Stanovic, live here on Bloomberg Business Week. Let's get back to our conversation. We're talking with the former CEO of Celebrity Cruises, Lisa Lutoff-Perlo. As we mentioned, she did join us earlier this year. We talked about her book, Making Waves, A Woman's Rise to the Top Using Smarts, Heart, and Courage. As we've said, she's taking over as CEO of World Cup Miami, and she's still with us from Fort Lauderdale. Lisa, one thing I wanted to ask you, and I was looking through in prep for this, there was an Instagram post, and it reminded us that you are the first former CEO from outside the world of sports to lead a FIFA World Cup 26 host committee. Do you feel pressure as a result of that?
No different than I felt my entire career, Carol.
Fair.
It's when the announcement was made, the local announcement in the I think it was the Miami Herald. Yeah, it was the Miami Herald. My husband took the page and he put it on my desk, and I took a photo of it and I posted on social media that day. And I have had so many opportunities to be covered by the press, whether it's business press like yours, lifestyle press, travel press, consumer press, magazines, newspapers, but I have never, until now, been headlined in the sports section. And I just thought that was hilarious that I've actually made the sports section. And yeah, you always feel a little bit of pressure because you're doing something new and you're in uncharted waters, if you will. Pardon that bad cruise pun, but I'm also invigorated and excited by it as well.
Or is there anybody you want to talk to, or you have been talking to, though, leading up to this, when you think about sport events or just experiential, things for consumers overall?
Well, one of the great things about this, just like other things that I've done in my career, is I'm surrounded by a lot of different types of experience in that regard. So I'm working with a group of people that has Super Bowl experience. I'm working with some people that have CONCACAF experience, some people that have experience working with FIFA, because that's also very new for all of us. And the subtitle of my book is A Woman's Rise to the Top Using Smarts, Heart, and Courage. And I think part of being smart is surrounding yourself with people who have different and more experience than you do in certain ways. So they add a tremendous amount of value. And I hope that I, in turn, add a tremendous amount of value as well. So it's a good team. We all bring some good experience that we all need. So I think it's going to work out well. At least that's the intention, for sure.
Are you still building the team at this point?
Yes, I am. We are small and mighty right now, and over time, the event is in a couple years, but right now, between now and the 1st of June, I'd really like to get the core leadership team together. So there's a couple of pieces of that puzzle still left to go, and then we'll put our planning together, and then we'll start adding the rest of the team in early fall.
Are you leaving me, Tim? Are you like pitching yourself?
I mean, in the winter, maybe. Yeah, I could go down there in the winter.
Send me a note. Yeah, private message me, Tim.
Sounds good. Hey, so is your boss FIFA essentially?
No, well, listen, all of our boss, I guess, all of our host city bosses, FIFA. And, there are a lot of restrictions. There are a lot of things that we have to follow. There are a lot of FIFA rules. This is a FIFA event in the city of Miami, New York, New Jersey, Kansas City, Seattle, all of the different cities. And we work very closely with FIFA, and they're getting to know the United States a little more, and we're getting to know them a little more. The way we work here is quite different, and our experience here is quite different than a lot of these other countries that they work with. And so we're all finding our way together to put on an extraordinary event in 2026.
Yeah, so cool. No doubt about it. Hey, one thing I was thinking, and I think about this when I'm going somewhere, whether it was a Disney theme park, whether it was the US Open, or just a concert, like this combination, this balance of willing to have a great experience, but you don't want to feel like you're constantly being faced with marketing and sponsors and everything screaming money. So I'm curious how you think about that balance. Is how important that is to you, or how you think about applying it?
Well, listen, every experience is going to have a branding component. That's just the way it is, because these people are paying the bill. But it doesn't have to be obnoxious. It doesn't have to be in your face. And if you're providing a great experience and a brand is associated with that, then you only would hope that people would have a really strong and good and positive feeling about that brand. So that's always something that's a delicate balance. I always feel like if people are having a lot of fun, then and they are enjoying the experience, just like I said in the cruise industry, then they're going to want to spend money, and they're not going to be opposed to the fact that there's a company that's associated with the experience that they're having. So we'll make sure that experience above all else, but that brands get the recognition they deserve for the investment that they're going to make.
All right, got to ask you, any fun players you've been able to talk to kind of pick their brain about stuff?
Not yet, but I can't wait to meet Lionel Messi.
Very, very cool.
And David Beckham, two great players right here in my backyard.
I have to say, at Milken, which was out on the West Coast last week, where we were doing our live broadcast, there was a line constantly for the main ballroom, which was actually kind of far away, and one of the big lines was for David Beckham, who was there making a presentation, so it was really, really cool.
He was at Milken, too?
He was at Milken. It's that cross-section of so much. Ted Lasso, their important word was believe. Do you have kind of a word that you keep in your head?
Ooh, what's going over your door to your office?
Exactly.
Okay, well, funny enough, Carol and Tim, over the door in my home office is the Ted Lasso belief sign.
No.
Yes.
I love
yes. That. Yes. And it's because I believe that I can do this, and I believe it's going to be fantastic. And there's a saying, whether you think you can or can't, you're right. And I believe I can.
Well, listen, we wish you good luck, and looking forward to hearing the plans as they roll out, and just looking forward to what you are going to be doing for the next couple of years. I wanted to ask you then what's next, but I feel like I'm going to give you a break and not go there, at least not yet, because you got a lot ahead of you. We believe in you, and really fun to have you back with us. So good luck with everything, and look forward to continuing the conversation. Be well.
Thank you. Thank you, Carol. Thank you, Tim. Always great being with you. Ciao.
All right, take care. Lisa Lutoff-Perlo, of course, as we said, former CEO of Celebrity Cruises, now the CEO of World Cup Miami, just taking that over. And of course, check out her book, fun read, Making Waves, A Woman's Rise to the Top Using Smarts, Heart, and Courage. And really, I feel like a determination that, listen, I can do this. Just go.
Believe.
That's
That's all you need.
Isn't that great?
That is, I love it. Hey, keep an eye on shares of Chubb in the after hours. They were up as much as 9.9%, Carol, now up 5.15% after Berkshire Hathaway unveiled a $6.7 billion stake, ending months of suspense over its mystery position in a financial firm that was previously kept concealed in regulatory filings.
Yeah, it's a company that's got a pretty big cash pile. Buffett's saying at the annual meeting it was a fair assumption that it will hit $200 billion by the end of this quarter. So yeah, they have some cash to play around with. This is Bloomberg.
Company news headlines on Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Cisco Systems shares now up by 4% after hours. Cisco delivered a solid sales and profit forecast for the current quarter, indicating some customers are beginning to invest in their computer networks again after hours. We got Cisco up now by about 4.1%. This week's renewed frenzy around meme stock favorites, GameStop and AMC Entertainment Holdings, cooled off today. Shares of both of those companies did decline today. We had GameStop down by 18.9%. AMC Entertainment lower today by 20%. Robert Sloan is managing partner at S3 Partners.
What Rory Kitty has done, he has socially mobilized financial publishing, and he has First Amendment rights to do so. This drives financial professionals totally crazy. They don't know how to model it. It's a risk management problem. And, you know, the meme stock community yells about naked shorting and counterfeit shares when short sellers are making money. When short sellers are losing money, they're saying, hey, this is crazy, it's not right, we don't run markets this way. It's a new world. Technicals drive the market.
Robert Sloan of S3 Partners. Uber is launching shuttle bus services to and from airports, concert venues, and sports stadiums, bringing a lower-cost service already available in its overseas markets to the United States. And Netflix will air 2 NFL games this Christmas Day in the streaming giant's latest push into live events. Netflix shares little change today, down less than 0.1%. And those are our top company stories at this hour. And this is Bloomberg.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Tim Stennebeck on Bloomberg Radio and Television.
All right, everybody, Tim and I getting ready to wrap up on this Wednesday edition of Bloomberg Business Week, but do not go anywhere because the Asian markets open up over the next couple of hours. That means Daybreak Asia coming your way.
And that also means that Doug Krisner is here in the studio with us. Give us a little preview.
Just getting a history lesson.
As we do with Doug Krisner.
Everything. Can I just tell you, world, you can put any subject out there, and Doug will be like, I know nothing, I know nothing.
And then he'll tell us everything.
Yeah, and it'll go for like 10 minutes straight. And it's all interesting, engaging, and just so smart.
You're very kind.
We speak the truth here.
So what did you discover today on your show? What was interesting?
You know, another batch of data, another rethink on Fed moves. That's, and you know what? Give it 24 hours, 48 hours, or a week, and we get another data point, and we'll think differently.
Right, but one of the things we're going to be talking about, did you see the dollar, how much it weakened today? I think we dropped, if you use the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index as a measure, I think we're at a one-year low right now. And this has been one of the big criticisms of finance ministers in the Asia region, is that the dollar has been so strong. They've had such difficulty, whether it's Japan, whether it's China. Some of the ASEAN countries have been feeling the same kind of pain because their currencies are on the flip side of that, right? And they've been seeing tremendous amount of weakness. Yeah, okay, if you're an export-driven economy, maybe it's a good thing, but you're also importing a tremendous amount of inflation with that, so it cuts both ways.
Is that what you have coming up on the program tonight?
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, what's top of mind for you today?
Well, you know, one of the things that struck me last night when we were on the air, Ilya Sutskever, who was the chief scientist at OpenAI, it was a little more than a year ago when we had that letter,
the coup?
a number, well, there was the coup.
It was in the fall.
But that was the fall. But a year ago, when a lot of the AI scientists got together and they created that letter, a number of signatures, and Sutskever was on that list, warning about the pitfalls of artificial intelligence and saying we need to really slow this down. Some people would refer to Sutskever as being kind of the conscience of OpenAI, really delivering a very cautionary message. Let's keep the rate of development here at a pace where we can control it. It seems like that's been upended right now. I mean, we're just flying at the speed of light, literally.
Isn't it Chuck Schumer today, right? Also, like, making sure that there's some money spending to make sure that we kind of keep on top of all things AI on a global scale. There's some stuff coming out of D.C. in particular. It's funny that you say that. We had a conversation today, and I'm thinking about AI, and I understand how it can help us, but I really do wonder if it's going to make us all kind of idiots in that we don't have to think anymore because sentences are finished, things are written for us. We don't have to kind of use math in our head, And I understand we've had calculators and things, but I do wonder how it makes us kind of lazy.
Julia Ongwin, writing in the New York Times today, very interesting op-ed piece talking about essentially the level of hype that may be in this space right now, and that Silicon Valley has been pushing a lot of this, and there are unrealistic expectations as to what AI is going to be able to deliver, and maybe a little bit of misperception right now in terms of what it's capable of doing at the moment. Right, so I think this is early innings of this stuff.
I just want to clarify, the Chuck Schumer thing is urging billions in spending with at least $32 billion in annual government spending to stay ahead of rivals such as China. This is a blueprint, according to a blueprint that's out there.
Well, that's consistent with a lot of what the Biden administration is trying to do, not only with the export controls, but these new tariffs. Yeah, definitely.
I'm really interested to see what Sutskever does next. He said he's working on something, did not reveal what it is, called it a project.
I mean, Altman called him one of the brightest minds that, right now. So
I think I would say we need to be super careful. We've seen the pitfalls of social media and what could happen.
Unintended consequences.
He said
right?
He's working on an as of yet unnamed project that is, quote, very personally meaningful.
Is that a book?
don't think so yet. I don't know. I won't say yes or no. I have no idea, but I'm very interested to see what it is.
But he is sober-minded when it comes to this, and he's as much a philosopher as he is, you know, a mathematician, and he's been very, very careful about deploying this technology. I don't know that a lot of his colleagues share the same point of view.
Many would say we need to have those discussions along with all the money and all the chasing that we are of AI overall. All right, Doug Krisner, looking forward to it. That's going to do it for Tim and me. Balance of Power starts now.
From Bloomberg's Washington, D.C. studios to our TV and radio audiences worldwide, welcome to Balance of Power. Alongside Kaylee Lyons, I'm Joe Matthew.
Game on. President Biden and Donald Trump agreed to 2 presidential debates, one in June, another in September. We'll discuss with presidential scholar Barbara Perry of the University of Virginia.
The House moves forward with a bill supporting arms shipments to Israel, attempting to split Democrats. We'll get the response from the other chamber, and Democratic Senator Michael Bennet of Colorado.
We'll also be joined this hour by Republican Senator Tom Tillis of North Carolina, a member of the Senate Banking Committee after today's cooler inflation data and the grilling of FDIC Chair Martin Gruenberg on Capitol Hill. So certainly there is a lot in terms of congressional matters to discuss this evening, Joe, but in presidential race matters as well. We went from thinking we might not have a single debate this election cycle to all of a sudden 2 on the books.
2 on the books, and it all started. This has taken place all since we woke up this morning. It started with a video on Twitter from the President of the United States with a message to Donald Trump. Here he is.
Donald Trump lost 2 debates to me in 2020. And since then, he hadn't shown up for debate. Now he's acting like he wants to debate me again. Well, make my day, pal. I'll even do it twice. So let's pick the dates, Donald. I hear you're free on Wednesdays.
The Biden campaign is now selling free on Wednesdays T-shirts. Let's bring in Kate Ackley from Bloomberg Government for more. So, Kate, the dates now agreed to: June 27th for the CNN debate, September 10th for one on ABC. Donald Trump says, let's have even more. But we really did not know if this was going to happen at all until earlier today.
Right. This was
what happened here?
All this social media. This was all kind of a back and forth on social media, you know, kind of invoking, you know, this make my day, you know. This was not what I was expecting of how this isn't the traditional path for setting up the presidential debates. You know, there's normally like this very formulaic.
Yes, right.
There's a commission on debates, and this is sort of outside of the boundaries of that. And I guess we shouldn't be surprised. It's 2024.
Well, if you're with us on Bloomberg TV or YouTube, you can see the post earlier today from Donald Trump. The last line says it all. Let's get ready to rumble. By the way, I thought we'd get sued if we said that. That's a very touchy thing. You can look it up, Google it. The fact of the matter is, you're right. The Commission on Presidential Debates was there to serve a purpose, setting the rules, finding the dates, the locations, all of which had been mapped out. Now, neither party wants anything to do with this institution in American politics. Is there no point to have the commission any longer?
Well, I guess the commission we'll see what happens at the end of this election cycle. Is there really no other debate? Is there no debate through the commission? Is this just totally going off on its own train? Which it seems like it will be, but you know,
there'll be no audience.
We'll have to watch. Yeah,
and they'll have the opportunity. At least we've been told moderators be able to cut off their mics. Kaylee, I don't know if they've actually agreed to that, but that would set a new precedent. Shutting a mic off on a president of the United States while talking policy?
That would be new. And I know there's also discussion about would there be debates on other TV networks. They've got CNN and ABC.
Sure.
Yeah. And
Trump's floating the Fox
Trump
debate.
wants Fox, and I'm sure there's some other networks that might want to get involved. But for now, it's just those 2, I guess. But we could, you know, who knows? We're talking here. What's going on, you know, X, formerly Twitter.
I say we take this on the road. It's going to be a tour.
Could be fun. But of course, while we're thinking about what happens between now and this first debate on June 27th, Donald Trump could be a convicted felon at that point. We don't actually know. His trial in New York seems close to wrapping up. And on that note, Kate, a lot of members of Congress have been visitors at that trial in New York, including yesterday the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, after just being saved by Democrats who voted to table Marjorie Taylor Greene's motion to vacate. We've had a lot of conversation here on Balance of Power about how you could see why Mike Johnson would feel the need to be close to Donald Trump, but did he just also ruin his chances of being saved once again, if necessary?
Well, we did see some Democrats criticize, and you heard people, even some, Republicans who are the never Trumpers, said, here's a man who, says sort of his code is the Bible. He's at the